the unseen weight of a human life. Dear friends, if you're here, listening not just with your ears, but with your heart, then this message was meant for you. Somewhere along the journey of life, we begin to realize that joy and suffering are not opposites. They are companions. Two sides of the same path we all walk. You cannot truly know peace until you've been through the storm. You cannot understand the value of sunlight unless you've sat through the cold night. And you cannot appreciate the depth of happiness without first tasting the bitterness of sorrow. So today, I invite you to walk with me, not just through the beautiful parts of life, but through the hard, quiet, often unspoken truths that shape us as human beings. You see, many people spend their whole lives chasing happiness, trying to buy it, plan it, even pray it into existence. But what if I told you that happiness cannot be found by escaping pain? That the doorway to peace is not in avoiding suffering, but in understanding it? In this video, we are going to explore something rarely spoken aloud: the 8 core sufferings of human life, the quiet burdens that follow us from birth until death. But more than that, we will uncover the deep, transformative value hidden within them. Because when you can look directly into suffering, you begin to understand something powerful: that joy is not what happens when suffering disappears. Joy is what grows when you stop running from it. And once we've walked through those 8 universal struggles, I'll share with you 7 timeless lessons rooted in both Buddhist wisdom and lived experience that can bring you back to peace, no matter how far you've drifted. So please, stay with me until the end of this message. Reflect with me. Feel with me. Because what you're about to hear isn't just philosophy. It's a lifeline, a way back to yourself. If something in you has been aching quietly, if you felt the weight of aging, of letting go, of heartbreaks you never quite healed from, this message is for you. And before we begin, I gently invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not for the sake of numbers or fame, but because this space is for people like you, for hearts that still seek meaning, for minds that still ask questions, for souls that are still growing, no matter their age. So join me. Let us step into this reflection together, not to dwell in sorrow, but to walk through it with grace. To understand the 8 sufferings that shape our lives, and to discover, through each of them, the profound and quiet truth of happiness. Are you ready? Let us begin. The first suffering, birth, the first cry of existence. Of all the experiences in a human life, birth is the most mysterious because we never truly remember it. And yet, it marks the beginning of everything we become. In Buddhist thought, the very act of being born is considered a form of suffering. Not because life is inherently cruel, but because the entrance into this world is filled with struggle, uncertainty, and pain, both for the mother and the child. It is no accident that a baby's first act in this world is to cry. Not smile. Not laugh. But cry. That cry is not just instinct, it is the soul's recognition that it has entered a world of impermanence, a world where love and loss walk hand in hand. And though we forget the physical memory of our own birth, our bodies never forget the truth, that life begins with vulnerability. No matter who we become, strong, successful, accomplished, we all started in helplessness. We all arrived naked, trembling, and dependent on the kindness of others to survive. But this vulnerability never really leaves us. It simply changes form. As adults, we are still born into new stages of life. The death of a parent, the birth of a grandchild, the transition from work to retirement, or the moment you wake up and realize your body doesn't move like it used to, these are all little births. And with each new beginning, we feel the weight of letting go. We feel the ache of leaving behind the familiar, the safe, the known. Some people spend their entire lives trying to avoid this feeling. They resist change, fear aging, deny death. But in doing so, they miss the quiet miracle hidden in every painful birth, that each time we are forced to begin again, we are also given the chance to become more compassionate, more humble, more awake. There is a man I once met at a hospice center in Massachusetts. He was 82, dying of congestive heart failure. He told me that the day he was diagnosed felt like being born again, but not in the religious sense. He said, "It was the first time in my life I stopped pretending I was in control. And strangely, that was the most peaceful moment I'd ever known." You see, the first suffering of life, birth, is not just a memory locked in the past. It is a pattern that repeats again and again. And if we fear it, if we see every beginning as a burden, we will live our lives in resistance. But if we can honor the truth of birth, that new beginnings are always messy, painful, and raw, we can start to meet life with more grace. And we begin to understand something powerful, that suffering is not the opposite of peace. It is the path to it. When you were born, The world did not ask you to be perfect. It simply asked you to breathe. That alone was enough. So if you are standing at the edge of something new, a diagnosis, a divorce, a retirement, or even a quiet change in your soul, do not be afraid. You have been born before. You know how to do this. And though you may cry again, as you did once long ago, those tears are not weakness. They are the beginning of another becoming. Birth is not only the first suffering. It is the reminder that we are always becoming, again and again. And that, in itself, is sacred. The second suffering, aging, the slow erosion of youth and certainty. If birth is the storm that brings us into this world, then aging is the slow wind that shapes us as we stay in it. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not come in all at once. No, aging arrives like morning fog, soft, quiet, unnoticed, until one day, we wake up and realize that time has rewritten our reflection. There is a peculiar thing about youth. When we have it, we spend it carelessly, like loose change in our pocket. We assume there will always be more energy, more time, more chances. But when we age, we begin to understand the truth, that youth was never a guarantee. It was a gift. And like all gifts, it was never meant to last. You do not notice the first signs right away. Perhaps it is the stiffness in your knees when you get out of bed, the fine lines around your eyes that weren't there last spring, the moment you walk into a room and forget why, or the pause you take before climbing a flight of stairs you once ran up without thought. But the real weight of aging does not lie in the body. It lies in the mind, in the subtle loss of certainty, in the realization that so many things, your career, your beauty, your independence, are no longer fully yours to command. And in that realization comes a quiet kind of grief, a mourning for the person you used to be, even if you are proud of the person you have become. I once counseled a woman named Eleanor. She had just turned 70. Her eyes still sparkled with intelligence, but there was a heaviness in her voice. She told me, when I was young, I walked into every room certain I would be seen. Now I feel like furniture. Her words pierced me not because they were dramatic, but because they were honest. Aging, for many, feels like a fading into the background, a slow, steady erosion of visibility, voice, and value. But here is where the truth gently reveals itself. The suffering of aging is not in the aging itself. It is in our resistance to it. The world worships youth. It praises smooth skin and quick steps. But wisdom, true wisdom, is carved only through time. The hands that tremble now have held newborn babies. The back that aches has carried burdens no one else ever saw. The eyes that struggle to read once saw moments of breathtaking beauty and unbearable loss. These are not signs of failure. They are the markings of a life fully lived. And perhaps, if we stop chasing the echo of who we were, we can finally hear the voice of who we are now. There is a story I keep close. An elderly man named Walter spent decades painting portraits. In his 80s, his vision began to fail. But instead of putting down the brush, he changed his approach. He began to paint from memory, from emotion, from essence rather than detail. When asked how he felt about losing his sight, he said, "I'm not seeing less. I'm just seeing differently." That is the quiet gift hidden in the suffering of aging, the invitation to see differently. To love more deeply, not because we have more time, but because we have less. To cherish a slow walk, not because we cannot run, but because we've learned the beauty of presence. To speak less, not because we acquired it, but because we've learned what truly matters. So if you are feeling the ache of age, the stiff joints, the slower thoughts, the fear of becoming invisible, please remember this. Aging is not the end of your worth. It is the deepening of your presence. You are not disappearing. You are ripening. You do not have to pretend it is easy. You are allowed to grieve. But you are also allowed to celebrate. Because aging means you made it through the storms, through the losses, through the years no one thought you'd survive. And that, in itself, is a triumph. Let every wrinkle be a story. Let every grey hair be a flag of endurance. And let your presence remind the world that dignity does not fade, it deepens. The third suffering, illness, when the body no longer obeys. There is a particular silence that comes with illness. It is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of being forced to listen closely, humbly to a body that no longer whispers but groans. We often live as though our bodies will always keep up with our desires. We expect them to carry our ambitions, our pleasures, our routines. And yet, the truth is, these bodies so strong in our youth are made of impermanence. They bruise. They break. They betray. Illness comes like an uninvited guest, sometimes in the middle of a good season, sometimes right after a joyful moment. One doctor's visit. One lab result. One unexpected phone call. And suddenly, everything changes. The future shortens. The days rearrange themselves around medication, appointments, and the quiet dread of not knowing what's next. But the deepest pain of illness is not always physical. It's emotional. It's the aching loss of control, the way it humbles us, forces us to ask for help when we've spent a lifetime being the one others depended on. It's the loneliness that creeps in when your body becomes a stranger to you. When you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the person staring back. I remember visiting an old neighbor named George. He was a retired construction worker, big hands, strong jaw, a man who once lifted beams like toothpicks. In his 70s, Parkinson's disease began to take his strength. One day, while trying to pour himself a glass of water, his hand trembled so violently he dropped the cup. Water spilled across the table. His voice cracked as he said, "I built houses. Now I can't lift a glass." There are moments like this, small to outsiders, but shattering from within, where illness does not just challenge the body. It threatens the identity. The man who was once reliable becomes dependent. The woman who cared for others becomes the one in need. And the question that haunts many is this: if I am no longer who I was, who am I now? But what if illness, as cruel as it feels, also offers something beneath the surface? What if the weakening of the body is not the weakening of the self, but the unveiling of it? Illness strips away performance. It removes the masks we wear for the world. And in that vulnerability, something sacred can emerge. A tenderness, a surrender, a deeper connection to the moment, to gratitude, to others. I once sat with a woman who had stage 4 cancer. She was calm, almost serene. She told me, "I've never been more alive. Because now, every single day feels like a gift I didn't pay for." Her eyes weren't afraid. They were grateful. And in that moment, I realized something essential. Our culture often treats illness as failure. But illness is not failure. It is a reminder that we were never in complete control. It is a teacher, a painful one, yes, but a teacher of compassion, of presence, of truth. When your body can no longer obey your will, that does not mean you are lost. It means your worth must now be measured by something deeper: your wisdom, your patience, your resilience, your spirit. So if you are facing illness, whether chronic or recent, visible or invisible, I offer you this truth: you are still whole. You are still needed. You are still enough. And when your hands tremble, let it be a sign not of weakness, but of all the things you have carried. When your steps slow, let it be a sacred walk, not a race to finish, but a path to remember. Illness may alter your body, but it cannot diminish your soul unless you let it. And you, my friend, are far more than flesh and bone. The fourth suffering, death, the pain of letting go. Death is often described as the final suffering. But the truth is, it's not death itself that terrifies us. It's the letting go. The moment we are born, death becomes inevitable. Every breath we take is a step toward the end of this physical journey. And yet, for most of us, death remains a shadow we refuse to look at. We speak of it in whispers. We avoid it in conversations. We pretend we are immune until we are not. But perhaps the deepest pain of death is not when it arrives. It is in the moments that lead up to it. The waiting, the knowing, the helplessness, the aching desire to hold on just a little longer to a person, to a moment, to a life that once felt full and still unfinished. When someone we love is dying, or when we ourselves are faced with the reality of our own mortality, there is a sacred tension that arises. A pull between this world and whatever lies beyond. A grief not only for what is being lost, but for what can never be fully said, fully held, fully finished. Years ago, I sat with a man named Richard in his final days. He was 86, a retired teacher, a father of 4, a widower. He knew the end was near. His body was thin, his breath shallow, but his mind was clear. He told me something I never forgot: dying isn't the hard part. It's saying goodbye to my children while pretending I'm not afraid. What he feared most wasn't the end. It was the unraveling of all the love he had built. Would his children be okay? Would they remember him as kind? Would the world forget him? And that is the suffering of death, not in the moment it takes us, but in the questions it leaves behind. For those of us left behind, the absence is deafening. The seat at the table that will never be filled. the phone calls that will never come, the scent on a sweater, the familiar laugh that echoes in memory but no longer in the room. And for those approaching the end, death often brings clarity, but it also brings sorrow. Not always for what is happening, but for what will never happen again. The sun rises, the smell of coffee, the voice of a grandchild, the ordinary miracles we overlooked. But here is the quiet truth: death, as final as it may seem, is not the end of love. It is not the end of meaning. In many ways, it sharpens both. It reminds us that nothing we truly love is ever wasted. That every gentle word, every act of kindness, every shared silence, those are the things that outlive us. The pain of letting go is real, and no one should ever be shamed for fearing death. But if we walk toward it with honesty, with gratitude, with presence, we might discover something profound: that death is not a punishment. It is a transition, a return, a homecoming. In Buddhist teachings, death is not seen as the enemy. It is part of the cycle of becoming. Just as birth was your entry into this world, death is your passage into the next. And between the two lies the sacred opportunity to awaken. So if you are grieving someone you've lost or preparing for your own eventual passing, I offer this reflection: you are not alone. Every tear you cry is a thread that connects you to all who have loved and lost before. And in that connection, there is strength. Let yourself mourn. Let yourself tremble. But also let yourself feel awe. Because the very fact that you are grieving means that you have loved deeply. And that is something death can never take away. When the time comes, and it will, may you find the courage not to cling, but to thank. To say, this life was mine. I loved. I failed. I tried. And I am grateful. In the end, that gratitude will be your light. And wherever you go next, it will go with you. The fifth suffering, separation, the ache of parting ways. There is a kind of sorrow that does not come with death. It comes with distance, with silence, with absence that still leaves the person alive, but no longer within reach. This sorrow has a name. It is separation. We live our lives surrounded by people, family, friends, neighbors, even strangers who become familiar over time. We share meals, secrets, laughter, and disappointments. And somewhere along the way, we forget that every meeting carries within it the seed of a parting. Every hello will one day lead to a goodbye. Separation does not always come in dramatic ways. Sometimes it slips in quietly. A grown child moves away. A friend stops calling. A sibling drifts out of your daily rhythm. The person is still alive, but the connection no longer feels the same. And in that quiet unraveling, something inside begins to ache. There was a woman I once met at a grief support group. Her husband had left her after 35 years, not for another woman, but for solitude. He said he felt like a stranger in his own home. She was devastated, not just by the loss of their marriage, but by the realization that someone could walk away while still breathing the same air. She told me, it's like being haunted by someone who's still alive. That is the cruelty of separation. It leaves you grieving without closure, missing someone who hasn't died, wondering if the bond you treasured ever meant as much to them as it did to you. But separation is not limited to divorce or physical distance. Sometimes, we are separated by time, by illness, by misunderstanding. A mother and daughter who no longer speak. A childhood friend who became a stranger. Even our younger selves, the person we used to be, can feel like someone we lost along the way. What makes separation so painful is not just the absence of another person. It is the absence of the shared meaning, the routines, the rituals, the way you used to make tea together, the Sunday calls, the private jokes that no longer have a listener. These small things, once ordinary, become sacred in their absence. And yet, separation is one of life's great inevitabilities. No relationship, no matter how loving, is immune to change. Some endings are natural. Some are unexpected. Some are necessary. Others are unbearably unjust. But all of them leave behind a trace, like a handprint on a window, long after the person is gone. So how do we live with separation? How do we carry the grief of what once was, while still being open to what might still be? Perhaps the answer lies not in denying the pain, but in honoring it, in recognizing that to feel such sorrow is proof of love. You do not grieve what you never cherished. And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is to let go, not with bitterness, but with blessing. To say, you were part of my story. I'm grateful for what we shared. I release you now, Not because I no longer care, but because holding on hurts more than setting you free. In Buddhist philosophy, everything that arises must also pass. People come into our lives for a reason, for a season, or for a lifetime. But no matter how long they stay, their impact can be lasting. So if you are living with the ache of separation with someone who left, someone who drifted, someone you had to walk away from, know this: your heart is not broken. It is simply remembering how deeply it loved. And that love, though it no longer has a daily expression, is not wasted. It shaped you. It made you kinder, wiser, softer. It taught you what mattered. And it prepared you to love again with more depth, more awareness, more courage. Separation is painful, but it is also sacred. It teaches us that nothing lasts forever, and that's precisely why we must cherish every hello, every embrace, every shared silence. Because we never know when it might be the last. The sixth suffering, resentment, the fire that burns within. Not all pain comes from outside. Some of the deepest suffering we carry is the kind we create and feed within ourselves quietly, gradually, often without realizing it. And among these hidden sorrows, few are more corrosive than resentment. Resentment is a slow, smoldering fire. It rarely explodes. It simmers over months, years, even decades. It hides behind smiles, polite words, silent treatments. It feeds on old wounds, on disappointments, on the belief that we have been wronged and never made whole again. What makes resentment so dangerous is not just how it makes us feel toward others, but what it does to us. It doesn't just poison relationships. It pollutes the heart, clouds the mind, and steals the peace that we've spent a lifetime trying to build. There's a story I often return to, a fable about a snake who crawled into a carpenter's workshop late at night. As it slithered across the floor, it brushed against a sharp saw and suffered a small cut. Startled and angry, the snake turned and bit the saw, cutting its mouth. In rage, it wrapped itself tightly around the saw to crush it, and in doing so, wounded itself fatally. This is what resentment does. We think we are hurting the person who caused us pain. But more often, we are only hurting ourselves again and again. In my years working with older adults, I've seen it countless times. The father who cannot forgive the child who chose a different path. The friend who still feels betrayed after 30 years. The sister who holds onto childhood rivalry as if it were yesterday. These feelings don't just sit quietly in the background. They become a lens through which we view our present. They drain joy from the moment. They cause physical illness, emotional exhaustion, and spiritual isolation. And yet, we hold on to them. Why? Because resentment often gives us a false sense of power. It says, as long as I stay angry, they don't win. But in truth, the longer we carry resentment, the more we lose not just time or energy, but the very ability to experience peace. Letting go of resentment doesn't mean we pretend the hurt didn't happen. It means we stop allowing that hurt to define us. It means choosing freedom over fury. It means releasing ourselves from the prison we unknowingly built. There's something else I've learned, and it may surprise you. Often, the person we resent most is not someone else but ourselves. For the mistakes we made. For the things we didn't say. For the ways we let ourselves down. We wear guilt like a second skin, punishing ourselves long after everyone else has moved on. But here is a truth worth holding. You are not your past. You are not your worst moment. And you do not need to keep bleeding over wounds that have already begun to heal. Resentment may seem justified, but it is never healing. Forgiveness, not for the sake of others, but for your own spirit, is the only medicine that softens its grip. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It does not mean returning to harmful situations. It means acknowledging the pain, grieving it, and choosing not to carry it forward any longer. And yes, I know forgiveness is not easy, especially when the wound runs deep. But it is always possible. And with every small act of release, with every breath that says, I will not let this own me anymore, you reclaim a little more of your life. If there is someone you still hold anger toward, if there is a part of yourself you cannot yet embrace, begin with compassion. Begin with understanding. Begin, not with a demand for justice, but with the gentle question, what would it feel like to be free of this? Resentment is heavy. And you, my friend, were never meant to carry it forever. Let it go, not because they deserve peace, but because you do. The seventh suffering, regret, the weight of what wasn't done. There is a kind of sorrow that does not scream. It whispers. A quiet ache that lives in the spaces between memory and imagination. A sorrow that says, what if I had? Why didn't I? If only I could go back. This sorrow has a name. It is regret. Among all the sufferings we carry in life, regret may be the most haunting, because it is not born from what happened, but from what didn't. It's not the chapter that was written, but the one we left blank. Not the love we received, but the love we never gave. Not the door that closed, but the one we never opened. Regret is the ache of roads not taken, dreams not pursued, apologies not made, forgiveness not offered. It is the echo of choices we didn't make either out of fear, pride, uncertainty, or simply the illusion that we had more time. I once sat with a man named David, a retired postal worker who had just turned 78. He spoke to me with eyes that were tired but gentle. "You know," he said, "it's not the mistakes I made that keep me up at night. It's the phone call I never made to my brother. The letter I never sent to my father. The way I kept waiting for the right moment until there were no moments left. That is the nature of regret. It feeds on delay, on postponement, on the belief that tomorrow will always come, that people will always wait, that feelings will fade and time will heal all things. But sometimes, time doesn't heal. Sometimes, it simply passes. And what we do not face remains lodged inside us, like a splinter in the soul. Regret can paralyze. It can keep us living in the past, replaying the same scenes over and over, hoping somehow the ending will change. But it never does. The past cannot be rewritten. Yet here is the truth we often forget. Regret, like all pain, is not here to punish us. It is here to teach us. It teaches us what matters most. It reminds us that words left unsaid carry weight. That kindness delayed can become kindness denied. That sometimes, the smallest actions, a call, a touch, a truth spoken aloud, are the very things that shape a lifetime. But the lesson of regret is not meant to trap us. It is meant to wake us up, to remind us that though we cannot change yesterday, we are not powerless today. If there is something in your life that still calls to you, a person you need to forgive, a talent you've buried, a dream you've long postponed, then regret has done its job. It has shown you where your heart still longs to heal. And healing is still possible. You see, life is not a straight line. It bends. It circles. Sometimes, what we missed once comes back in a new form. And even if we cannot go back to the exact moment we lost, we can still move forward differently. There is a woman I once knew named Irene. At 65, she regretted never going to college. She'd spent her whole life raising children, supporting others, always saying, maybe someday. When her husband passed, she finally enrolled. Not to get a job. Not to prove anything. But to honor the part of her that had waited so patiently. At 70, she graduated. Her smile that day was not just pride, it was release. That is the power of facing regret. Not to erase it, but to redeem it. So if there's something you still carry, a word unspoken, a goodbye never said, a path you wish you'd taken, ask yourself, is it too late, or have I just been afraid? Because the most beautiful thing about being alive is that every sunrise offers a new chance. Not to undo the past, but to live more fully in the present. Let regret be your teacher, not your jailer. Let it show you what matters, so you don't forget again. And then let it go. You cannot change what's behind you, but you can soften what lies ahead. And that is how peace begins. The eighth suffering, attachment, when we cannot let go. There is a quiet suffering that hides behind even our deepest joys. It is not loud. It does not arrive with pain, but with longing. It is the kind of sorrow that only comes when we hold on too tightly to what life is already asking us to release. This is the suffering of attachment. To be human is to love. And to love is, inevitably, to become attached. We become attached to people, places, memories, possessions, roles, and even to the version of ourselves we once were. These attachments begin innocently enough, rooted in affection, connection, purpose. But over time, without even realizing it, we begin to grip instead of hold. We begin to cling instead of cherish. And it is in this clinging that suffering grows. I once visited a woman named Clara, a retired schoolteacher in her late 70s. Her home was filled with pictures, framed memories of her husband who had passed, of children now living across the country, of students long grown. Her voice trembled as she showed them to me. "Sometimes I sit here and talk to these photos like they're still with me," she said. "I know they're gone, but I don't know how to let them go." Her pain wasn't rooted in the past. It was in her inability to live fully in the present. She was holding on so tightly to what once was, she had no space left for what still is. This is what attachment does. It tricks us into thinking that if we let go, we will lose everything. But often, it is the opposite. When we hold too tightly, we lose the ability to receive anything new. Attachment shows up in many forms. It is the mother who cannot stop worrying about her grown children. It is the man who cannot forgive life for taking his job, his status, or his physical strength. It is the aging woman who still mourns the mirror from 20 years ago. It is the refusal to accept that life is changing even when change is the very nature of life. And perhaps the most painful form of attachment is emotional. Our refusal to release old pain, old identities, old versions of who we thought we were supposed to be. We become prisoners of our own story, afraid that letting go means losing ourselves entirely. But the truth is this: letting go is not the same as forgetting. It is not the same as giving up. It is an act of grace, a choice to stop resisting the flow of life and start trusting it. In Buddhist philosophy, attachment is seen as the root of all suffering. Not because love is wrong, but because grasping, clinging, and refusing to accept change only leads to pain. True love, true presence, true freedom, they all begin with acceptance. Imagine holding a bird in your hand. If you grip too tightly, you crush it. If you open your hand, it may fly, but it may also stay. That's the paradox of love. It cannot be forced. It must be free to breathe, to change, to move. I met a widower named Thomas, who lost his wife after 53 years of marriage. For 2 years, he wore only black. He refused to change anything in their home. Her toothbrush remained on the sink. Her slippers untouched by the bed. "I'm scared," he said, "that if I move on, I'm leaving her behind." But one day, he went outside and planted roses in her garden. He told me, "I realized that loving her doesn't mean staying frozen. It means living well, because that's what she would have wanted." That's when I understood, letting go is not betrayal. It is honoring what was by choosing to live what is. So if you find yourself holding tightly to something or someone you've already lost, ask yourself gently, what am I afraid will happen if I let go? And then ask yourself, what might happen if I don't? Letting go makes room for healing. It makes room for joy to return, not because we forget the past, but because we make peace with it. Life, by nature, is a river. It flows forward, never backward. The more we try to dam its current, the more it floods us with pain. But when we loosen our grip, when we open our hands, we find that we can float, even in sorrow. We can breathe, even in change. And in that breath, there is space. Space for grace. Space for peace. Space for something new to bloom. Let go not because the past didn't matter, but because your present deserves a chance to breathe. Transition, after the storm. What do we do with our pain? If you've stayed with me through each of these 8 sufferings: birth, aging, illness, death, separation, resentment, regret, and attachment, then you already know something that many spend a lifetime trying to deny. That pain is not the exception in life. It is the fabric of it. No matter how much we love, no matter how wisely we live, no matter how carefully we plan, pain finds its way in. It comes through the cracks, through change, through loss, through time. And yet, that is not the whole story. Because what we do with that pain, how we meet it, how we breathe through it, how we choose to rise from it, that is where life begins again. That is where peace is born. The purpose of naming these sufferings is not to leave you in sorrow. It is to awaken you, to remind you that even amid heartache, there is a quiet path that leads home. A path not made of answers, but of insight. Not of escape, but of presence. In the ancient wisdom of the Buddha, suffering is never the final word. It is the first noble truth. But it is followed by a second, a third, a fourth. The path continues. And along that path are teachings timeless, gentle, transformative, meant not to rescue us from our pain, but to teach us how to live with it. So now, let us turn. Let us soften. Let us move from the recognition of pain to the invitation of peace. I invite you to stay with me just a little longer as we explore 7 teachings that have helped countless souls find calm in the chaos, hope in the hardship, and grace in the letting go. You don't have to do anything. Just listen. Let these words be a hand on your shoulder, a light in the fog, a breath in the heaviness. The storm may not be over, but now, you are not walking through it alone. Teaching 1. Peace comes from within, not from the outside world. There is a moment, usually quiet, often unexpected when a person realizes that everything they've been searching for in the world was never out there to begin with. Not in a bigger house. Not in the approval of others. Not even in perfect health or in time neatly arranged. But in the stillness of their own being. Many of us spend decades trying to arrange our lives in such a way that peace will finally arrive. We chase success to feel secure. We seek love to feel whole. We plan, prepare, protect, thinking that if we can just get everything right, peace will finally settle in like sunlight on a calm lake. But life doesn't work that way. The world changes. People disappoint. Bodies age. Plans fall through. Peace that is built on external conditions is a peace that is always in danger. And yet, there is a peace that cannot be shaken. It's not loud. It doesn't come from achievement. It's not earned through struggle. It is found only when you stop looking outside yourself and begin listening to what's already within. I met a man in his early 80s named Raymond. He had lost much in his life: his wife to cancer, his son to an accident, and eventually, his independence to a stroke that left him partially paralyzed. And yet, when I visited him in his small apartment, he greeted me with a smile that felt like springtime. "People think I must be suffering," he said softly, "but I've never felt more free. Because for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to make the world fit my expectations. I just sit here and breathe. And that's enough." Raymond taught me something no textbook ever could, that peace is not something you chase. It is something you allow. It is not created by silence around you, but by silence within you. But how do we reach that silence? The first step is to stop outsourcing our calm to things we cannot control. The moment you say, "I'll feel better when she calls me back," or "I'll be at peace once this pain goes away," or "I'll be okay when my finances are stable," you place your well-being in the hands of a world that was never meant to hold it. That kind of waiting is endless. Instead, begin with breath. Not deep, dramatic breathing. Just gentle awareness. Right now, take a moment to notice your breath. Not to change it. Just to feel it. Inhale. Exhale. That movement, so small, so constant, that is your anchor. That is where peace begins. Then, turn your attention to your thoughts. Watch them as if they were clouds drifting across the sky. Don't chase them. Don't fight them. Just watch. Notice how they rise and pass. Like everything else. This is the beginning of inner peace, not the absence of thought, but the loosening of your grip on needing those thoughts to define you. The world outside will always stir. There will always be news to worry about, aches to tend to, people who don't understand you, and days that don't go your way. But none of that has to rob you of your stillness unless you give it permission to. The great teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "Peace is present right here and now, in ourselves and in everything we do and see. The question is whether or not we are in touch with it. You are not broken. You are not too late. You do not need to become anyone else to be worthy of peace. All you need is to come home to yourself. Right here. Right now. This is where peace lives." Teaching 2, anger burns the hand that holds it. There is a fire that lives inside all of us. When used wisely, it becomes warmth, passion, protection, courage. But when left uncontrolled, it becomes destruction. That fire is called anger. We've all felt it. The sharp sting of betrayal, the frustration of being misunderstood, the slow build-up of things unsaid and unseen. And in those moments, anger can feel powerful. It rushes through the veins, gives voice to silence, and makes us feel, if only briefly, like we have some kind of control. But here is the truth that many of us learn too late. Anger may hurt others, but it always wounds us first. It is like holding a burning coal in your bare hand, intending to throw it at someone else. You might succeed in tossing it, but not before it scorches your own skin. I once met an older man in a support group who hadn't spoken to his brother in over 30 years. They had fought over money, over pride, over a sentence spoken in heat. But what stayed with me wasn't just the story of the argument. It was what came after. The regret. The wasted decades. The birthdays missed. The parents' funerals attended on opposite sides of the room. And the pain etched into the lines of his face, not from the brother's actions, but from the grudge he had chosen to carry. Because that's what anger does. It takes residence in your heart and calls itself justified. It convinces you that holding on will protect you from being hurt again. But what it really does is keep the hurt alive. Long after the moment has passed, the anger remains, coloring your days, shortening your patience, weighing down your spirit. There is no shame in feeling anger. It is human, natural, sometimes necessary. But there is great suffering in feeding it. We think anger gives us power. But the truth is, it steals our presence. It clouds our vision. It makes us reactive rather than reflective. And it binds us to the very pain we wish to escape. So what do we do when anger rises? First, we acknowledge it. We name it. Not with judgment, but with honesty. I'm angry because I felt disrespected. I'm angry because I felt abandoned. I'm angry because I feel unseen. Beneath every burst of anger is a softer wound: hurt, fear, sadness, longing. Next, we breathe. Deeply. Gently. We do not respond while the fire is roaring. We wait for the flame to settle. Because what we say in anger rarely reflects the truth of who we are. And once spoken, words can never be taken back. And then only then we choose what to do with it. Maybe we speak. Maybe we don't. Maybe we forgive. Maybe we walk away. But we choose. Not from rage. Not from ego. But from wisdom. There's a reason why so many ancient traditions speak of patience as a virtue, of forgiveness as strength. Because it takes far more courage to let go of anger than to unleash it. It takes maturity to respond with calm when everything inside you wants to explode. But here's the gift on the other side of that restraint: peace. Real, lasting, soul-deep peace. And if you've lived long enough, you know peace is worth more than any apology you never received, any revenge you never took, any argument you didn't win. So if there is a fire burning inside you, one you've carried for years, maybe decades, I invite you to lay it down. Not for them. Not because they were right. But for you. For your heart. For your sleep. For your freedom. Let your anger rise like smoke, and then let it go. The hand that opens is always lighter than the one that holds on. Teaching 3. Your thoughts shape the world you live in. There is a secret world we all live in. Not the one made of streets and buildings, not the one measured in inches or miles, but the one built entirely out of thought. Every word we speak, every decision we make, every emotion we feel, all of it begins as a thought. A sentence whispered in the mind. A belief repeated so often that it becomes invisible. The world you see is not just what's in front of you. It is shaped by the story you tell yourself about it. If you tell yourself the world is cruel, you will find cruelty. If you believe everyone is selfish, you will see selfishness. If you think you are powerless, then your strength will stay asleep. But if you shift the thought even slightly, the entire landscape changes. Suddenly, what was threatening becomes a challenge. What felt like failure becomes a lesson. What once seemed meaningless begins to feel full of quiet possibility. This is not about denial. It's not about pretending life is easy or that suffering doesn't exist. It's about choosing where your mind rests. Choosing the frame through which you view your reality. Because while we cannot always control what happens to us, we can choose the meaning we assign to it. And in that meaning lies our freedom. I once spoke with a woman in her early 70s who had recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She could have fallen into despair. And for a few weeks, she did. But then she made a quiet decision. Every morning, before she got out of bed, she said out loud, "Today is still mine." That small sentence, just 4 words, became her anchor. Her body was changing, yes. But her mind refused to abandon her spirit. That's the power of thought. But here's what many people don't realize. Our thoughts are not facts. They are habits. And like any habit, they can be changed. Gently. Slowly. Repeatedly. If you've spent years telling yourself, "I'm not enough, it's too late for me," nothing ever changes, then those thoughts have likely shaped your life in ways you didn't even notice. Maybe they kept you from trying something new. From forgiving someone. From loving more openly. But here's the truth. You are allowed to think a new thought. You are allowed to say to yourself, "I can grow. I can begin again. I am worthy of peace, even now." And the more you repeat that thought, the more it becomes part of you, not a fragile hope, but a steady knowing. Thoughts are like seeds. You cannot expect a harvest of joy if you are planting doubt every morning. But the opposite is also true. Plant something kind, just one small sentence, and see how your life begins to bend toward light. So I invite you to notice your thoughts, not to judge them, but to witness them. Become curious. Ask, is this thought helping me? Is it true? Is it mine, or did someone else plant it in me years ago? You'll be surprised by what you find. And once you begin to change the way you think, the world will not look the same. You'll see beauty where you once saw burden. You'll see softness where you once felt fear. You'll find that peace doesn't come from changing everything around you, it comes from changing how you relate to it. You are not trapped. You are not broken. You are the author of your inner world. Write something new. Teaching 4. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is awakening. All our lives, we are taught to observe the world around us, to understand others, to learn what people want, what they feel, what they expect. From childhood, we are praised for being smart, especially when we can read a room, win an argument, or remember what someone said and use it wisely. That, they tell us, is intelligence. And it is. But there is another kind of knowing, quieter, deeper, and far more transformative. It is not the knowing of others. It is the knowing of yourself. And that is awakening. Because while it takes skill to understand other people, it takes true courage to turn inward, to sit with yourself in silence, to ask, without flinching, who am I beneath all of this? Not the roles you play: parent, worker, caregiver, spouse. Not the labels you've worn: strong, weak, capable, broken. But the essence beneath the story. The presence that has been with you since the beginning. Most people go their whole lives looking outward, measuring success by how well they are liked, respected, or admired. But no amount of approval from others can make up for the pain of being disconnected from yourself. That disconnection often shows up in subtle ways. The emptiness that creeps in even after a busy day. The anxiety that won't quiet, even when things seem fine. The sense that you're always performing, but never arriving. To truly know yourself means to look at your joys and your fears, your strengths and your shadows, and to hold them all with gentleness. Teaching 5. Trade envy for admiration, and you'll lighten your load. Envy is a heavy feeling. It doesn't come with a roar or a scream. It often arrives in a whisper, a glance, a quiet tightening in the chest when we see someone else succeed in ways we haven't. And as we grow older, envy doesn't always disappear, it simply shifts shape. We envy the neighbor who's surrounded by grandchildren every weekend. The friend whose health seems untouched by time. The old classmate who still looks 10 years younger, or seems to be traveling the world while we stay home. Even the stranger online, smiling from some mountaintop we'll never climb. We don't always speak of these things. Sometimes, we don't even admit them to ourselves. But inside, something aches. A voice says, "Why not me?" Or "What did I do wrong?" And that's when envy becomes suffering. Because envy is not just comparison, it is the belief that another's joy diminishes our own. That their light somehow casts our life into shadow. But that is a lie. Someone else's blessings are not proof of your failure. They are proof that beauty is still possible in this world. That joy is still alive. That healing is still happening. And if it's possible for them, it's still possible for you. I once met an older gentleman named Howard. He was in his early 80s, quiet and observant. One afternoon, he listened as someone in our group spoke proudly of their daughter's recent promotion. Another woman mentioned her son's wedding. As the conversation moved on, Howard spoke softly. "I used to feel left out when people talked about their children. Mine don't speak to me anymore. I'd sit in silence and feel ashamed. But lately, I've been trying something new. I bless their happiness. Even if I can't feel it for myself yet, I let their joy warm the room." That shift from envy to admiration is a quiet revolution. It doesn't erase our pain, but it transforms it. It softens the bitterness. It turns walls into windows. And it reminds us that every good thing we witness in someone else is a seed proof that goodness still grows in the world. When you admire someone's strength, it does not mean you're weak. When you celebrate their love, it does not mean you are unloved. When you honor their joy, it does not mean your sadness is invalid. It simply means your heart is big enough to hold both your truth and theirs. So when envy arises, and it will, because you are human, don't shame yourself. Just notice it. Breathe into it. And gently ask, what in their story is waking up something in mine? Then bless them, even silently. Because when you do, something shifts. Envy loosens. Your heart opens. And you begin to realize that admiration is not passive. It is generative. It grows. It inspires. It invites. And most beautifully, it lightens your load. You were never meant to carry resentment. You were never meant to hoard joy like it was scarce. You were meant to share in the beauty of this life, even when it's not yours directly. So trade envy for admiration. Not because you're trying to be noble, but because peace is too precious to waste on comparison. There is enough joy in this world for all of us. And sometimes, the very joy you admire in someone else is the same joy making its way toward you. Teaching 6. Be kind to everyone, because sooner or later, you'll walk in their shoes. There's an old saying you've probably heard. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see. But what makes this teaching so powerful, especially in our later years, is not just its truth, it's how personally it begins to feel. As we age, we start to realize something we didn't fully grasp when we were younger. We've now stood in the very shoes we once judged. We used to wonder why the elderly moved so slowly until our knees stiffened. We used to get frustrated with people who forgot things until our memory played tricks on us. We may have judged a parent who clung too tightly to their children until our own children stopped calling as often. We used to pity the lonely until we spent long afternoons hearing only the sound of our own breath. Life has a quiet way of humbling us. Not as punishment, but as a teacher. It strips away our assumptions. It softens our edges. And it leaves us face to face with one simple truth. We are all vulnerable. We are all human. We are all, in our own way, hurting and hoping and trying to hold it all together. That's why kindness is not just a virtue, it is a necessity. It's the only way to truly meet each other in the middle of this complicated, beautiful, difficult thing called life. Kindness doesn't always have to be grand. Sometimes, it's a gentle tone with the grocery store clerk who seems overwhelmed. It's holding the door open for the person behind you, even if they don't say thank you. It's choosing not to argue, even when you know you're right. It's calling someone who's been quiet for too long. It's smiling at a stranger because you remember what it felt like to be invisible. I once met a woman named Teresa at a meditation group. She told me about a day when she had been feeling especially down. Her arthritis was flaring. She'd had a frustrating call with her daughter. Everything felt heavy. That day, a young man at the pharmacy had held her bag for her and walked her to her car. Just a minute of his time. But she wept afterward not because of the gesture itself, but because in that moment, she felt seen. That's what kindness does. It doesn't erase someone's pain, but it lets them know they're not alone in it. And here's the quiet truth. When you extend kindness to others, you soften your own suffering too. Your heart opens. Your breathing slows. Your burdens feel lighter. Because kindness is not a gift we give, it's a bridge we build. Between our pain and someone else's. Between our story and theirs. And perhaps the most important kindness of all? The one we give to ourselves. So many of us are generous with others, but ruthless with our own hearts. We forgive friends for mistakes we still punish ourselves for. We speak gently to others, but cruelly to our own reflection. But self-kindness is not selfish. It is survival. It is essential. So today, let this be your invitation. Be kind to the tired mother in line behind you. Be kind to the angry neighbor you don't know what they've lost. Be kind to the quiet man who never asks for help he may have no one else to ask. Be kind to the version of you who made mistakes. Be kind to the body that's carried you all these years. Because eventually, in some form or another, we all walk through the same storms. And when the rain comes, kindness is the only umbrella worth holding onto. Teaching 7. Let go of control and trust the flow of life. For most of our lives, we are taught that control is strength. That the more we can organize, predict, and manage, the safer we'll be. We build schedules, set goals, create routines. We plan for the future. We try to shield those we love from harm. And when things go right, we feel accomplished, capable, in charge. But then, life happens. A diagnosis we didn't expect. A phone call that changes everything. A storm that tears through our plans. A goodbye we weren't ready for. And in those moments, control shatters. What we thought we could hold slips through our fingers. And we are left not with answers but with uncertainty. With silence. With surrender. For many people, especially as we grow older, this surrender feels like defeat. We fear that letting go means giving up. That if we stop controlling, life will fall apart. But here is the quiet, powerful truth. Letting go is not giving up. It is finally learning how to float. Imagine for a moment a river. You're in it, holding onto a large branch near the shore. The current pulls at you, tugging you forward. But you resist. You grip tighter. You fight the flow. You strain, and struggle, and exhaust yourself because letting go feels too risky. You're afraid of where the river might take you. But the river knows the way. The current isn't trying to drown you. It's trying to carry you. And when you finally release your grip, you don't fall. You move. You begin to glide. You are carried not by force, but by something wiser than your fear. That's what life is. It is not a puzzle to be solved. Not a project to be completed. It is a current. A rhythm. A breath. When we stop demanding that life match our expectations, something unexpected happens. We begin to feel peace. I once sat with a man who had lost everything in a house fire: his home, his possessions, even his old journals. Decades of memories gone in a single night. He wept, yes. But in the weeks that followed, he began to speak differently. He said, "I realized I never really owned anything. I only borrowed it for a little while. Even time. Even people. Even the version of me I thought I'd always be." That wisdom did not come from reading a book or hearing a sermon. It came from losing control and discovering that even then, something deeper held him. When we let go, we don't become passive. We become present. We stop gripping what was, and we begin to receive what is. We stop pushing the river, and we start trusting the direction it already knows. Does this mean we never plan, or prepare, or care? Of course not. It means we do our part and then we release the outcome. We offer our love but don't cling to how it's received. We take care of our bodies but understand they will age. We save for the future but find joy in today. Because control is an illusion, and surrender is a choice. Not a weak one. A brave one. So if you are holding too tightly, to a story, to a person, to an old version of yourself, to a fear about tomorrow, I invite you to soften your grip. Take a breath. Say to yourself, I trust the flow of life. Not because it's always gentle, but because it's always moving. And in that movement, you are not lost. You are being carried by something far older, far wiser, and far more loving than control could ever offer. Let go, and let life meet you where you are. A gentle return to peace. If you've stayed with me through each of these truths from the silent ache of birth to the final surrender of letting go, then allow me to say something simple, but deeply meant. Thank you. Not just for watching. Not just for listening. But for allowing yourself to feel. To remember. To reflect. To breathe again, in the company of what is real. Because this journey was never about avoiding pain. It was about seeing pain differently, holding it with gentleness, and discovering that hidden within it is the doorway to peace. You've walked with me through the 8 great sufferings of life, those universal passages that no one escapes. Birth, aging, illness, death, separation, resentment, regret, and attachment. And then, step by step, you open to something softer. 7 teachings to carry in your heart, no matter where you go. That peace lives within you. That anger only burns the one who holds it. That your thoughts shape your entire world. That knowing yourself is the beginning of real freedom. That envy can be transformed into admiration. That kindness, especially to yourself, is the greatest strength. And that surrender is not weakness, but wisdom. These are not just ideas. They are invitations. To live more slowly. To love more deeply. To walk this life not with clenched fists, but with open hands. And if even one sentence in this message found its way to your heart, then I believe something good has already begun. So before we part ways today, I want to gently invite you. If you found peace here, subscribe to this channel. Not just to stay connected, but to continue walking this quiet path together. There will be more reflections, more stories, more spaces like this to rest your spirit. And if there was something in this video that touched you, would you take a moment to share it in the comments? What resonated most with you? Which truth felt closest to your own life? I read every word you write. And sometimes, the very thing you share may be the light someone else needs to find their way through the dark. Lastly, if there's someone in your life who may need this message, a friend grieving, a parent aging, a neighbor walking quietly with pain, please consider sharing this video with them. Healing grows best when it's shared. Thank you for allowing me to walk beside you today. And may the hours ahead bring you stillness. May your evening be soft. And may your heart remember always, that you are not alone on this path. Until we meet again, take care of your body, guard your peace, and live from the center of your soul. Wishing you a day filled with gentleness and grace.